So here we go. This is video number 10 on the 50 problems with the Mormon Church video, or in other words, what I have to say about what's on there, or the subjects that are brought up, and some others that it brings to mind. So we're still on polygamy. There's just a whole lot of material that there is to discuss there, and let's see where we go from here.
Joseph married at least 34 women, many without Emma's consent, as forbidden in the Doctrine and Covenants, and 11 of whom were already married, some without their husbands knowing. 10 of Joseph's wives were teenagers, some as young as 14. This was shocking, even by 19th century standards. Joseph also married some of his foster daughters. Joseph used a variety of methods to coerce women into marrying him, including promises of eternal life, threats of damnation, and even claiming that he himself was under the threat of an angel with a flaming sword. President Hinckley publicly said polygamy isn't doctrinal, despite teachings by numerous early church leaders, including Brigham Young, that it was essential for exaltation. The only scriptural justification for polygamy is to multiply and replenish the earth. So either Joseph was sleeping with his 14-year-old wives, or he wasn't adhering to the scriptural laws. Joseph married Fanny Alger years before he had the sealing power, or received any revelation on polygamy. Brigham Young taught Adam-God theory at General Conference, and as part of the Temple Endowment ceremony. This doctrine is now disavowed by the Church. Brigham Young taught blood atonement, now also disavowed. This doctrine factored into the events which led up to the Mountain Meadows Massacre, where church leaders murdered over 100 pioneers traveling through Utah. Black people weren't allowed to hold the priesthood until the 1970s. Joseph gave it to a few people, but from Brigham Young to Spencer.
Well, I went over there a little bit as far as the polygamy thing goes, but okay, now we'll get into the discussion on it.
Joseph married at least 34 women, many without Emma's consent, as forbidden in the Doctrine and Covenants, and 11 of whom were already married.
Okay, so it says he married at least 34 women. Well, on is it Family Search? Yeah, I think that's about how many women are shown as wives of Joseph Smith on the church-owned FamilySearch.org. Were they married to him? Okay, we mentioned that earlier. It was illegal to have more than one wife in the states that Joseph Smith resided in. So, it wasn't legal in Kirtland, Ohio. It wasn't legal in Missouri, and it wasn't legal in Nauvoo, Illinois. So how did he marry them? When we started off with the Fanny Alger business in the previous video, that was in 1833, 3 years before anything was mentioned as far as Elijah coming to restore sealing power. Although D&C 1 talks about that Joseph Smith would have power to seal up the unbelieving and rebellious unto the day of the wrath of God or something like that. It's D&C 1. There's been no talk of having any authority from God. It's illegal, and so Fanny, as we said, was about a 16-year-old girl, orphan girl, needed a place to stay, and the Smiths opened up their home. Now, I don't know every detail of what was going on. It sounded like she was working, helping around the house, maybe doing some nannying work, and maybe earning her keep involved a little more than that. So, as friends of Joseph said, or people friendly to him wrote in their diary, that it became impossible to conceal the results of the celestial relations between the prophet and young Fanny, 16-year-old orphan girl, basically living kind of like a foster girl nanny in their home. And apparently apparently Joseph introduced her to some new doctrine. And so she got pregnant, and Emma graciously threw her on the straight. So she eventually married someone else, and we're told she was Joseph Smith's wife in the the church claims her as Joseph Smith's first polygamous wife, plural wife. So is that a marriage? Is that a wife? Is it to create seed? To have children and throw them and their poor teenage mother out on the street? Is that what God was restoring to Joseph Smith through Joseph Smith? In the Revelation published in 1843, as it says in section 132, and hints that he must have known something about it in 1831, which I mentioned earlier. I've read that in 1831 Joseph called elders who were married on missions to the Lamanites, and then encouraged them to pick up some Lamanite wives and have some babies, help get that white and delightsome prophecy coming true for the Lamanites found in 2 Nephi chapter 30 verse 6, which disappeared under Spencer Kimball's reign. And now they just need to become pure and delightsome, since they weren't becoming white and delightsome. So, okay, so these 34 so-called wives were not legally married to Joseph Smith. He started off doing this before he ever claimed any kind of sealing authority, and the Section 110 business on sealing powers had zero to say, that I recall, about sealing men and women together for eternity in marriage. So how is it that he was married to them? Is that an honest statement, or were they concubines? Well, later on, he started gathering the wives at quite a pace, especially around 1843. And, sometimes more than one in a month. Some of them were some pretty young girls, and some of them got told some pretty strange things. So Joseph went to Heber C. Kimball and his wife and asked Heber for his wife, and later said it was just a trial. They said, how about our 14-year-old daughter, apparently. And of course there was probably a lot of anxiety involved with the whole thing. I don't want to belittle whatever occurred there in these poor people's lives, but 14-year-old girl said that Joseph Smith spoke with her and he promised her exaltation for her and her entire family if she would become one of his wives, be sealed to him. So she stated that she felt she had been pretty naive as a 14-year-old, and we don't know all the details about what occurred in that relationship, but the things that he told her, how much sense do they make? So other people's exaltation would be sealed upon them. They would have their call-in elections made sure. Everything would be made certain because of her action of giving in to the desires of the prophet. How about the doctrine of free agency taught in the church? How's that go? Okay, so we had a bunch of those girls. We had some young girls. We had the Partridge sisters, the daughters of the bishop of the church, the presiding bishop, Edward Partridge. He married those girls. What about the Lawrence sisters? They were teenagers, and yeah, they were orphaned also. And Joseph Smith got a hold of their inheritance, their dowry, which I think was, I don't want to misquote it, it was several $1,000s, which would be worth a lot more today. And I don't know that they ever got any of it back. and he had custody over them, had control of that, and he married the girls. Married his foster daughters, and they were in the mansion house bedrooms there. And Emma got Joseph with one of the girls. Now, it was either one of the Lawrence sisters or one of the Partridge girls. So Emma started throwing girls out again. She just had a problem with her husband hanging out in the locked bedrooms with these girls. Can't imagine why. So these are some of the things I don't recall hearing in gospel doctrine class, but let's move on to what was said with the photo slide in front of us. Other men's wives. Well, we read through section 132 in the previous videos, and it talked about having as many virgins as he wanted. Well, other men's wives, I don't recall that being mentioned. So how does that work? How does that work? And there's been plenty of apologetic work done on that. So people say, well, he just had to obey the angel and the Lord saying he had to take other wives. So he's taken other men's wives? Well, you get apologists, guys like Brian Hales, saying, well, he didn't have intimate relations with them that I know of. You can't prove it, so we'll just say it never happened. Okay, so what? He's sealed to these women, and their husbands aren't, so he beats them to the punch. He's sealed to their wives, and who are they going to have to go to the celestial kingdom with? Go get somebody else? How's that work? So basically their whole dream of family is destroyed in that case, and I haven't heard how apologists make that one okay. They're just concerned with telling us that Joseph couldn't have been having intimate relations with these ladies, because obviously that's just too much of the adultery to be allowing us to believe that the prophet could have been involved with. So he just was sealed to him for eternity and wasn't doing anything with him, is what they're telling us. So if that was the case, then yeah, so these guys have lost their sweethearts for eternity. You gotta love Joseph for that, taking your wife then for all eternity. Well, there are guys that went on missions, and Joseph called them on missions. One fellow he called on a mission. He called him on a mission right after he moved him in across the street from him, gave him a house, gave him, they had a consecration thing going on or something. Got rid of the guy and took his wife. Anyway, that fellow, he only had to share with Joseph Smith, but when Joseph Smith died, then his wife wound up with Brigham Young, and Brigham Young wound up telling the guy, well, you have to go find somebody else because I'm basically, proxy for Joseph Smith, and she belongs to him. So this time, just make sure you don't get someone else's, soulmate. And that guy was heartbroken. So, these are some of the stories that, that are in original, people's diaries and so forth. Todd Compton wrote, In Sacred Loneliness, and he's got a lot of the information on each of these 30-some women that the church, claims were wives of Joseph Smith. So that's polyandry. One of the gals did tell her daughter that she was actually the daughter of Joseph Smith while she was married to her husband. Well, the sharing thing was going on, and Joseph Smith went after Orson Hyde's wife and got her, and he went after Elder Orson Pratt's wife, and she said no thanks, and then her reputation got smeared. So yeah, it doesn't look like it's promoting real good family values in these plural relationships from the review of the diaries of the people involved. And I've seen no revelation authorizing taking another man's wife either. Well, see you on video 11.